Good evening and welcome. I'm Councillor Sayar Raza, Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's now just gone past 7 p.m. I would like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the committee, my fellow scrutineers and cabinet members and officers of the council and members of the public, whether present with us in Hounslow House or watching the committee on council's YouTube channel. Our agenda today, the final meeting of the committee this municipal year, sees us consider some substantial topics. We'll begin with an item on our recent scrutiny in a day investigation into neighbourhood enforcement, and follow this with a chance to contribute to current housing strategy consultation. Our third substantial item, it is in fact the trio of topics. We will consider the final recommendations from each of the committee scrutiny panels. In addition, we have three shorter items on our agenda. They are an update following the North West London Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, the meeting earlier this month, chance to suggest topics of next year's committee to incorporate into its work programme, and any urgent business should there be any. Having walked through the content of today's committee, I'll now take a few moments to set out the mechanics of the meeting. As chair, I'll run the meeting and invite people to speak. I hope to combine questions and observations to allow for a fluid discussion. I shall invite our guests to introduce their reports. I will then invite members of the committee to ask questions of our guests. I, or Councillor Mia, as my vice chair, shall then speak last and then briefly sum up the discussion and advise of any issues or common ground to note. Every member of the committee who wishes to speak will have the opportunity to speak. Please be mindful of your fellow scrutineers and committee members and our guests to ensure your contributions are pertinent and help us frame meaningful recommendations. Having set out the way in which I will chair the meeting, shall we begin? For the benefit of our guests and those who may be watching us online this evening, would you, my fellow committee members, like to introduce themselves? Yep.
I'm Emma Yates, Councillor for Brentford West.
Councillor Jack Emsley, Councillor for Chiswick Homefields.
Councillor Smina Nagra from Feltham North Ward.
Councillor Kuldeep Tak from Feltham North Ward.
Councillor Ghazala Butt from Kentford Ward.
Thank you, committee members. And
Hi, I'm Councillor Riaz Guru from Heston Ward. Sorry for the late.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so we move on to agenda item number 1, apologies for absence, declaration of interest, and any other communications from members. I have received apologies from Councillor Sidhu. Are there any other apologies I'm unaware of? No. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to agenda item number 2. So this is the minutes that we have before us for our meeting in April. Councillor Elmsley, I know you have a point of accuracy and clarification that you wish to raise as matters arising. Before we get to that, does anybody have an issue with accuracy with the minutes? So this is just the minutes. Committee members. Thank you very much. Please, Councillor Elmsley.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It is matters arising, really, rather than accuracy, isn't it? Page 6 of the minutes confirms that we were told by one of our guests at the last meeting that there were a set of targets, objectives, KPIs for the report that we were looking at, that they weren't included in the appendix, but that they would be given to us post-meeting. We obviously subsequently discovered that those objectives didn't exist and that there weren't KPIs and numbers. I think that answer that we were given sort of set the tone for the recommendations that we made for the line of questioning and for the discussion. So I suppose it's really a question for you, Chair, or for officers. What do we do in situations where a piece of information we've been given in this meeting turns out not to be correct and does materially affect the recommendations that we make? Can we take them back? Do we have to redo it? What can we do? And then I suppose, as a safeguard, how do we ensure that doesn't happen again?
No, thank you for that, Councillor Elmsley. So yes, we obviously we can't talk about what we've already discussed. The minutes is accurate, so the minutes is already accurate. There is a suggestion. I'll just read this out to you. So whilst the minutes are accurate, I agree. I just want to clarify things for the public record. It is obviously important that committee can rely on accuracy both of material presented and answers given to us. The officer in question has already apologised to you and to me, yep, and to the rest of the committee for the confusion he may have inadvertently caused. The minute as it stands is an accurate reflection of what was said, but I do recognise the need for additional note to supplement the record. Okay, so I would suggest a form of words that we can add to the supplement, and this is what it is, and this is for all the committee. Subsequent to the meeting, upon receipt of additional material covering indicators and targets, it was realised that some of the statement was inaccurate. The actual situation was that most of the services' current KPIs had targets and services was working towards having targets for all the new performance indicators. Are we content with that clarification?
Can you say that last bit again? I'm really sorry, Chair.
Yeah, so the last one, the actual situation was that most of the services' current KPI had targets and services was working towards having targets for all the new performance indicators.
I think that's fine. I mean, maybe it'd be more straightforward just to say that they don't have them. I mean, we can say we're working towards them. That's what he said in the meeting. And then when questioned, said that wasn't the case. So maybe we need to just be totally clear that they actually don't have those targets in place. I defer to you, but I think it's important that we have that accuracy in the minutes and also then the subsequent information that we were given.
I mean, we can still, of course, get that information. So once it's there, we can get the information. Yeah, thank you. Again, are we all content with the minutes now? And yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Emsley. Okay, so we move on to agenda item number 3 then. Scrutiny in the day, neighbourhood enforcement recommendations. As important as meetings in committee is, there is also merit in scrutiny taking place outside of Hounslow House. For 2 years now, we've undertaken Scrutiny in the Day, a focus session where over the course of 6 to 7 hours, we get under the skin of particular topics and development recommendations. Last year, we looked at the role of housing association in the borough. Members of the committee will recall that when our housing association partners were our guests last month, they mentioned how impactful a day spent together had been. This year, we look at the council services neighbourhood enforcement. In January, we had expressed an interest in understanding more about how enforcement was working locally. And so on the 23rd of April, a number of members of the committee went out into the borough to find out. We are joined this evening with Councillor Rugwinder Sidhu, Cabinet Member for Public Safety, Regulatory Services and Enforcement, by Elliot Brooks, Director of Communities, Parmjit Chanda, Assistant Director, Safer Communities, and Lorraine Curry, Head of Neighbourhood Enforcement. You are fully engaged with the work of the committee last month, and I'd also like to thank Jiman, if I spelled that wrong, sorry, Cairo Hamilton and Leroy Phillips from the neighbourhood enforcement team, who gave their time to show of the practical realities and challenges neighbourhood enforcement faces. We spent time at the neighbourhood enforcement service base in Trim Walk, and then looked at enforcement challenges in Brentwood and in Heston. Whilst it is always good to receive robust data as a committee, the chance to see the impact of work in local communities is something we should not overlook. With Cabinet having just agreed the Council's wider enforcement activity should be reviewed this year and next, it was a good opportunity for the committee to involve itself into the policy development. By the end of the day, we had 6 recommendations. Tonight, we are formally sharing them with Councillor Sidhu and officers. The report sets out the recommendations. As I run through each, I'd like to explain our rationale. We heard of many instances where effective enforcement was made harder because it was unclear who could be held accountable. The lack of certainty over property ownership can lead to confusion because there's no obvious angle of enforcement. That's why we recommend that a comprehensive picture of land ownership across the borough should be developed. We saw examples of individuals and businesses acting in a way that was making things worse for others. Classic case was just everyone was just motivated for purely selfish reasons. That's why we recommend that the council should consider acquiring land in blighted areas. For example, compulsory purchase orders could help make enforcement activity easier and encourage different use of spaces. Whilst issues of enforcement can appear clear-cut, discussions across the day reminded the committee that enforcement is not transactional, but rather deals with the complexities. As such, we recommend that enforcement review offers an opportunity to bring teams together around a locality rather than a service. Demographically and changes societal demands means that we recommend that neighbourhood enforcement should consider a breadth of responses and ongoing commitments to responsive service provision. Whilst the way in which you take this recommendation forward will be down to you. We touch upon examples of other councils using new technologies such as a variety of service provision, AI, drones, and behavioural science to support work in enforcement. Clearly, this would have validity beyond neighbourhood enforcement and informed enforcement review. We know of examples of other local authorities who have already adopted similar approaches. Oxford City Council has used drones, for example, and there are obvious benefits of using this technology to assist enforcement actions. Enforcement is an important universal service. Neighbourhood enforcement and presumably other enforcement teams should consider how it presents its work. We recommend that enforcement demonstrates not just the volume of activity, but also the resources required to make difference in local areas. Regular ongoing communication is key here. Scrutiny of the day demonstrates that a range of actors have a role in making spaces work for people. This shared commitment to place relies on a combination of organisation and individuals playing a part, and both organisation and individuals acknowledging that council, business, and citizens all have different responsibilities. This is why we recommend that these responsibilities should be made clear. For example, as residents move into Hounslow, we should provide them with the guidance on how they can be a good neighbour. Educating people about enforcement activity, and as businesses operate, we should make clear their wider corporate societal responsibilities. Those then are the committee recommendations following the scrutiny day. Obviously, it is not the job for the committee to operationalise recommendations, and whilst we hope Councillor Sidhu will accept our suggestions, we recognise that worked up proposals would need to be developed and owned with officers within the relevant services. And of course, consider legal and financial guidance, as would be the case with any new work. That, though, is contingent and recommendations being accepted. To that end, is there anything you'd like to say, Councillor Sidhu?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for having me here. As you said, that the report highlights councillors from Overview and Scrutiny Committee spent a day with the council's neighbourhood enforcement team. The committee heard about a range of work carried out by our teams. The councillors attended the site visits with officers to witness first-hand issues such as fly tipping. Throughout the day, committee spoke in depth about the work of the team, including volumes of cases, the interdependency and collaborative work carried out by the council teams and external partners, and explored digital solutions. They also identified barriers and difficulties faced by the officers when carrying out the work duties to legal limitations These are not specifically in Hounslow, but this is a London problem, I'll say, it's a national problem. As a lead member of Public Safety, Regulatory Services and Enforcement, I'm happy to accept the recommendations set out by the committee. And as discussed on the day, the Cabinet agreed a council-wide review of enforcement activities at the April meeting. The recommendation cover key issues which have already been highlighted, addressing such as better use of technology, clarity on ownership of land across the borough, and a locality-based approach to solving long-standing complex problems. I'm confident that review will address the recommendations, and I look forward to updating the committee in future meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sidhu. Does any of the committee members want to pose a question to Councillor Sidhu, or indeed Scrutiny in day process? Councillor MC.
Thank you, Chair. I think these are really interesting recommendations. I particularly like the AI and drones. I think that sounds very sci-fi and cool, but also probably leads to better outcomes for residents as well. And obviously, I'm glad that the Cabinet member has accepted them. I guess my question, maybe for you, Councillor Sidhu, is when you come back to OSC in 6 months' time, what does achieving these recommendations or these targets look like? And I ask that because when we had this chat with the Centre for Governance back in October, one of the recommendations that he made was that when we're drafting recommendations as a panel, we want to set targets that have the correct level of specificity, and we want to be able to measure how much of those targets have been achieved. So I suppose my question posed to you, Councillor Sidhu, is what will it look like in 6 months' time? What kind of measurable targets will you be trying to set out? And what does implementing these actually look like? Maybe that's an unfair question, but
Like the enforcement review will cover most of the recommendations made by the committee, and bringing the different bodies into one regime where we can overlook more effectively, and like increasing the fines that should affect the deterrent. Maybe we can helpful the coming future. And so these enforcement review will help us to move forward, and we are working on that, and that will cover most of the problems which was recommended by the committee.
Councillor Juno. Yep.
Yeah, scrutiny in a day, we actually focused on few areas like ASP, waste and fly tipping. I recently has reached out to you about problem in my ward where behind the school, there's constant fly tipping taking place. We clear it out, but they refill it again. There's a camera there, signage there, showing there's a camera is recognized, which take out the number plate of each car is dumping there. But I could not see anything there. It's probably their P&R camera, which is not belongs to us. It's probably belongs to the traffic. My question would be, there's a shop who actually should be responsible to monitor their rear yard. Can you not enforce them basically, put their CCTV cameras so that can be monitored? And they should bear some burden as the shopkeepers, of their shop owners.
Thank you, Mr. Mia. Sometimes it's the complexity of legal problems. Sometimes things look so simple, but actually when you go legal complications behind that is difficulty for the council to pinpoint that this is the person who's creating a fly tipping, and the responsibility is a whole process. And first is issuing the fixed penalty, then after the steps which has to go forward are beyond our control, because the legal complications, things are happening, but some things you can go to the press and publicize, some things we cannot. So sometimes we think that nothing is happening, things are happening, but due to legal complications we cannot advertise that things. So yeah. and some points, like there is a shopkeeper, that's private property. And we have limitations on private properties. Where there's health and safety issues, there we can go and issue tickets and enforcement in a different way. But like black bags, couple of black bags, then the fly tipping keep on increasing. And then only at certain age we can use our enforcement. It's more sort of legality behind it. It's not that there's no will to do it. Will is there behind it, but it's just the step we take has to be with the legal framework.
It's costing the council money and the time. There should be some sort of accountability and prevention. It does not have continue to happen.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to stop the debate. Can I've just got legal coming in here to share a few bits.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So, as the Chair noted in the introduction, and as Councillor Sidhu has rightly said, any proposals for looking at the use of technology, including drones, for enforcement purposes, will have to be carefully considered and worked up, taking into account the legal framework. There are limitations to what the Council can do when it comes to use. So, for example, if you were to get into the realm of surveillance of individuals, not only do you have data protection issues, but you've also got the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. So if we were to carry out covert surveillance and seek to use that information, we'd be breaking the law. So we do have to be really careful, but I know that it is recognised by members and colleagues that when it comes to looking at future proposals, all of those proposals will be worked up, taking into account the regulatory framework.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, Councillor Gould?
Thank you, Chair. Similar to the legal point of view. Recently, the one of family, there was student attend in the Hounslow Borough. They left the Hounslow, moved to the Ealing somewhere in 2 months back, and their stuff, the new tenant, the landlord threw outside, and they got plenty notice. They clearly mentioned they show all the new tenancy and all the proof they didn't move to new property, but still the council is enforcing. They have no money to the appeal. So what mechanism you are adopting to deal this matter? Because the new landlord or the new tenant, they throw his stuff and they got plenty.
Thank you, Councillor Gul. I won't be able to discuss any personal, this is more sort of a casework that can be dealt outside this scrutiny.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Councillor Sidhu. Is there any other questions for the report? Any sort of personal issues, do please take it out of this meeting today. You can get direct to Councillor Sidhu. Of course, you can put an email if there's anything that is a little bit caseworky. Is that all right? Is your question going to be on casework? Okay. Councillor Nova.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I have a questions to the neighborhood enforcement. I do believe is a Lorian. Kelly can give me the best answer. Do you think so is a fortnightly waste collection lead to the more fly tipping?
Thank you, Councillor. I have to caveat to say that I don't work in the waste and recycling team, so I wouldn't want to say anything that, could impact their services, but I have an element of experience. I introduced fortnightly collections when I was working in Ealing. It was about 10 years ago, so it may be outdated. Short answer, no, I don't think it does. Not the evidence that I've seen, provided that we get collections right, that we get collections on time. I think a lot of the fly tipped or fly tip waste that we see on the streets could be domestic waste that's not been collected, and then there's the sort of debate between is that fly tip waste or is it domestic waste, etc. So it's not a straightforward answer from my experience. So I'm caveating it massively. I would say not necessarily. I know people used to have a debate about charged bulky waste collections and whether that impacted fly tipping. But I know when we looked at this years ago in London, Haringey statistically was the worst borough for fly tipping, but they had a free bulky waste collection service. So I don't think it's always sort of cause and effect. There's lots of reasons why fly tipping increases. I would defer to our waste and recycling team to answer that properly, but that's just my 2 pence on it.
It's okay.
That's helpful.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move to the recommendations. Firstly, Councillor Sidhu, thank you so much for accepting the recommendations. So we will formally agree that. And can I have a seconder to the recommendations? Thank you very much. That is, and can I have a vote for the recommendations there, please? Thank you. That is all passed. Thank you so much for that. And can we ask that um, your department can come back in the future to OC and give us an update? That'd be absolutely fantastic. We'd love to see you guys here again. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Look, so thank you all of you for being here. You're more than welcome to stay, of course, and continue with the OSC meeting. But if you'd like to leave, of course, you're more than welcome to as well. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Okay, so we move on to agenda item number 4. So this is the housing strategy 2025 to 2030. It's important that a committee can respond to new issues as they emerge. As such, the launch of the consultation on the housing strategy last month was too good an opportunity that passed without committee contributing its perspective. This evening, we have a chance to focus on a particularly important element of the Council's work. The Council's housing strategy confirms the focus of Hounslows housing services. Some of the statistics make for somber reading. 4,200 households on the borough, 4,200 households on the borough's housing register, spending an average of 3 years waiting for the home. A trebling of homelessness approaches to the council over the course of 2018-2024 strategy. Perhaps unsurprising when one reads the median wage grew 24% over that period, but rents increased by 46%, with an average two-bed home now costing £1,900 per month. Even if Hounslow is a more affordable borough than many in London, the report tells us house prices are now considerably impossible and possibly unaffordable. This is a bleak news indeed. The draft housing strategy puts forward 5 priorities: tackling homelessness and rough sleeping, ensuring safe and decent council housing, raising standards in the private rented sector, helping residents live healthily, independent and sustainable lives, and ensuring more genuinely affordable homes. The committee is asked if we agree with these priorities on which we considered most important. We are also asked if we believe there are any priorities that have been missed, and if we are happy for the overall approach taken with the refresh of the strategy and the drafting of the actions to do with the priorities. Note, we are not going to note, the update of the preparation of the new housing strategy 2025-30, which is currently undergoing formal public consultation as a draft version. Consider and comment on the proposed priorities for tackling housing need in the borough and the nature of sufficiency of purposed arrangements for meeting them. I'd like to welcome our guests for this item. Joining us, we have Councillor Sue Sampson, Cabinet Member for Housing Management and Homelessness, and Modesta Uncha, Director of Housing, and of course we have Ben Tomlinson as well. Thank you so much for being here. Councillor Sampson, may I ask you to introduce a report?
Thank you, Chair. Could I hand over to Ben because he can condense it down a lot more than leaving me waffling along.
Yes, of course, that's fine. No problem.
Thank you, Councillor. That's very gracious of you, and thank you, committee. So very briefly, I'll just go over the presentation that was attached as an appendix to the papers that were circulated, which basically introduces the housing strategy. So the housing strategy is about what is going to be the strategic direction of this council for addressing housing need in the borough over the next 5 years. So it's a medium-term strategy. It incorporates the homelessness, rough sleeping and housing strategies all into one document. It may be for the committee to note, in fact, that there's a further legal requirement that it's now a statutory duty placed on councils to also do a supported housing strategy. It hasn't actually been codified into official guidance yet, but that was introduced by I think a supported housing act last year or 2023. So obviously, in common with any strategy or policy put forward by the council, it needs to be an intelligent-led document that targets effectively our very limited resources into having the greatest impact and helping those in greatest need. To further those aims, we are engaging currently publicly with residents, having conducted an internal consultation exercise with colleagues and select partners, which we have a lot of dealings with, such as the NHS and obviously our colleagues in social care, which now reporting to the director. So just to set out for people what our precisely our responsibilities are: preventing and assisting homelessness, providing universal housing options advice to anybody who approaches the council stating that they're in housing need and needs help with that. And then at the sharp end, we target people who are rough sleeping. We have to maintain the council's own stock of its council housing, of which there are 13,000 so in the borough, enforce standards in the private rented sector, which is under the planning directorate, and also support the vulnerable. So make sure that people who are disabled, care leavers, have access to suitable accommodation or adaptations to their property, for example. So all of this is counted into what we term housing needs, and all of it is covered by the strategy in terms of how we intend to meet it over the next 5 years. So just to give you a brief outline of what we did, mention that there was a needs assessment, mainly looking at public domain information, national statistics, etc., demographics. We conducted a gap analysis to see how effective the previous housing strategy was in meeting those needs, what the residual gap was, internal stakeholder engagement, and took the paper to cabinet, I believe last month in April. It was approved to go out to public consultation. And here we are. So we are out for a period of 6 weeks, which is considered reasonable. That is, albeit short, the expected typical length of a consultation that pretty much all the other local authorities do across London. We will then take the final version of the housing strategy to cabinet for approval in July. So just to go into a bit more detail about the kind of things that we've covered, and thanks to the chair for giving a very good summary from the paper. So everyone will be aware, things like the grey wave that's happening in the borough, the proportion of people who are over 65 and indeed very old is growing. What does that mean in housing terms? It means we need more supported accommodation for people in that age bracket. It means that we need more adaptable accommodation that can take wheelchairs, things like level entry baths and showers to ensure that people's needs can be met, they can remain independent in their homes. Disability increased over the previous 5 years. It might not sound much, but going up sort of 6 points is a good 20% of what it was previously if you look at it as a fraction. So an extra fifth of disabled people in borough compared to what there was in 2018 is very significant. That again means more adapted properties. And things like during the pandemic, we saw a large proportion of people they'd be NEETs if they were younger, but essentially drop out the workforce. And that's a socio-economic pressure on their wages, on their access to other things, which makes them resolving their housing situation themselves increasingly difficult, particularly when you look at what's going on in the market and the population, which is although the borough's population increased, the housing numbers increased, but the affordability, as the chair mentions, got significantly worse. Essentially, wages going up on average didn't keep pace with the increase in rents, which have skyrocketed as they have the rest of London. So it's important to note the housing market, local housing market, isn't just Hounslow, it's a wider ecosystem spilling over the borders into other boroughs and beyond the M25, but all of it's particularly unaffordable. So in terms of homelessness, again, we mentioned a big spike in numbers during the pandemic, which have failed to go down. They did, in fact, treble in terms of both the homeless approach as people who've been what we'd call traditional statutory homeless, where they're made typically evicted by their landlord and come to us in Access Hounslow, and indeed also rough sleepers, the more stereotypical thing that you'd think of, people with no accommodation out, sleeping bags on the street. Although we do stress that we support those people and nobody should be spending a second night out, that trebled over the previous term of the housing strategy. So where all this led to was our draft ambitions for 2030. We distilled it into 5 equally important objectives, which are essentially, which are covered in the report. These should reflect them if I've updated the report correctly. Reduce homelessness and rough sleeping, tackle their causes and consequences, improve the quality and livability of existing homes and estates, broadly speaking, secure additional high quality, safe, green and affordable housing, support residents to live independently, promote their health and well-being, and just generally tackle the quality condition of our own stock, including ASB and things like that. So it's important to note that the housing strategy as a policy sits in the second level of the council's policies below that say the corporate plan, which we follow, but also complements the Hounslow local plan, the spatial planning document, which sets out what we're going to build and where. So we have to make sure that our housing strategy harmonizes with that so that it doesn't cause any problems for planning committee and things like that. Again, some of the feedback that we got now, what people are telling us from the internal consultation exercise. So homelessness, big issue. We need to do more around prevention. The housing supply is going to get tighter. It's going to be extremely difficult, and we're going to see a lot of people who delivered housing, extra additional affordable housing in the last 5 years struggle to provide that. In terms of RPs are building less, we're building less because we've got less money. Again, more need to support disabled people, ensure there's more adaptable, suitable accommodation for them, and really work together in partnership with other social landlords, private sector landlords, and people across the borough to improve general housing conditions. So with all that said and done, I refer back to the questions which our lead member will be able to assist you with. What would the committee like to advise that we should prioritise? Do you have any priorities for us? What opportunities from your personal experience and casework do you think we need to do more of or do better? And is there anything that we should stop doing or change our approach of? Thank you, lead member.
Thank you so much, Ben. Do you want to carry on?
No, I'm just happy to take any questions.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so we'll move to that point of clarification. Thank you very much, Ben, for the report and the strategies moving forward. Okay, so we will go through sort of some of the questions that we have already here, and I'm sure we'll get some clarification here. If I can ask firstly, Councillor Emsley, just to put his 2 questions in first, please, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, happy to. We're jumping around in the order of the questions. That's fine. Yeah, I guess. Thank you very much. First of all, Ben, for the presentation. I thought it was very interesting. I guess a bit of context for this question. In the consultation draft housing strategy on page 3, I think it's rightly stated that there's been a long-term decline in the supply of housing in the borough relative to the increase in the population. And obviously the stated aim on slide 6 is to address that shortage. I went back and had a look at some of the GLA data, and Hounslow saw a 95% decrease in affordable housing starts in the borough last year, compared to 88% across London. So it is a London-wide thing, but Hounslow is probably slightly worse. It's really concerning that we're not building enough. And I think that's kind of the foundational problem, isn't it, really, that there's not enough houses being built, and that's leading on to all of these extra problems. So I guess my question is, what are we going to do about it? I mean, how do we get rid of that long-term decline in the supply of local housing? How do we reverse it? I mean, it's all very well sort of aligning to the local plan, but shouldn't we be banging at their door and saying we need to build more?
So yeah, the first point to clarify, Councillor, is that in fact percentages can be deceptive because we were such a high level of delivery in the previous strategy. That's probably why we've had a higher reduction on average than London. It's not necessarily that we've been clobbered worse, but more that we delivered amongst the top tier of people in London in the previous 6 years. So it can cut both ways in terms of that observation. But yes, as our lead member will be happy to concur, essentially it's a economic problem in that the interest rates increasing massively raised the cost of lending. There are also inflationary pressures on building costs that made it extremely uneconomical and challenging for any landlord to deliver properties. So that affects local government, that affects private registered providers of social housing, and indeed anybody in the private market looking to make money on construction of residential properties. So it's not just restricted to Hounslow, it's not just restricted to local government, it is a market problem. And in order to make affordable housing work, it has to be subsidized. Somebody, I'd gently suggest central government has to dip into their coffers and liberate funding in the form of grants or cheap loans in order to grease the wheels and let us keep building. Without that money, we have really exhausted the extent of the funding available to us within our housing revenue account, because we, as you correctly stated, Council, recognised it as a problem of not building enough. We built as much as we possibly could, but there is a limit to our financial reserves, and we are rubbing up against that at the moment in terms of what's available. Don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, if I could just come in. I've got some headings here that would highlight give you an example of what we're up against as a local authority. Well, not just us, right across London. Higher interest rates on development finance, cost of building has increased markedly. Higher sales risks with market uncertainty linked to higher interest rates, constraining people's ability to raise mortgages. Building safety regulator, the rollout has been problematic, and there are significant concerns regarding delays and predictability in the system. Supply chain issues linked to the war in Ukraine and post-Brexit. Viability issues leading to an off-site monetary contribution to affording housing, and schemes increasingly showing only low or even no levels of affordable provision as viable. Registered providers and councils are suffering a lack of liquidity, meaning they are unable to pick up the Section 106 affordable sites, which is impacting on both the supply of the new affordable homes as well as overall housing supply. So there's a number of contributing factors to that. So it's not just one. We wish it was just one, so we can wave the magic wand and fix one issue, but it isn't. It's right across the board, and there's a number of contributing factors.
I suppose my question, I completely agree with you. I think the planning system, the costs, I mean, we're not building enough, and there are a lot of reasons why we're not building enough. I suppose the question I would sort of slightly push on is what's the plan? Because we know that we're not building enough. We know that we have to. I think one of the measurements for success for priority 5 is that we increase the total number of new affordable homes secured. How do we do that? What's the plan? I guess is the crux of the.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose the plan is we continue to work with central government, continue to lobby for more money in the grant system, and continue to see whether the government is going to put more money into public sector housing, because we can't do it alone as a council. The housing associations are suffering the same fate. The developers are suffering the same fate. So unless the economy improves, and it's a whole infrastructure, a whole community system, a whole ecosystem, unless there is a change one way or the other, then you can't necessarily build your way out of housing supply. You can build, but it comes to a point where you're so stretched within the HRA. We haven't got any enough leverage to build anymore, and we're relying on range of partners to help us out.
But like you say, we can't do it. We physically cannot do it quick enough.
And then I think that's a fair answer. I'll move on to my second question, which is more about the consultation, because I know this is out for consultation at the moment. And there's a range of really important stakeholders and groups that are being specifically consulted. I guess sticking to the affordability priority and sticking to the ensuring that we're actually building and improving the supply. Young people and young families, I think it's fair to say, face the brunt of the housing crisis in this city. Is there anything being done specifically to capture their views on this strategy and its priorities? Because I suspect they would say building, increasing the supply, making sure that housing is affordable is their number one concern.
Thank you, Councillor. So we are contacting everyone who's on our housing register, which sounds unrelated at first, but essentially the way that you get on our housing register is either being homeless and in priority need, which means that you're a family, or that you are overcrowded in your accommodation, which again typically means that you are a young family unable to afford larger accommodation. So from an abstract housing perspective, we are targeting that group as closely as we can. We are emailing everybody who's on a housing register. We may send them a text message depending on what the perception of how invasive that is, to solicit their feedback and find out what their opinion is, what their priorities are, councillor, so that we can address them in terms of housing need. We know the needs out there. As our lead member just said, it's very difficult for us to meet that need, but we still want to hear from people, to hear what their priorities are, what they feel we could be doing, and if there's any deficiencies in our current service offer, that should unearth it, because it will speak to everybody who's currently registered as homeless with us at the moment, which includes predominantly young families because of how you qualify for that under the statutory assessment, and also similarly anybody who's in extreme housing need and is on the council's housing register. So we will speak to people most in need in that category.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Councillor Nagra, your question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question. How is the council ensuring current London Borough Hounslow housing stock is in a good repair? How is the progress since we last discussed this as a committee? Similarly, what progress has been made on empty homes since we last looked at voids?
Yeah, hold on. Sorry. Okay, the housing, we have an 5-year asset management plan that was agreed by Cabinet
Originally 2017, but then it went as an appendix with the housing strategy.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
refresh.
Yeah, it's a refresh, yeah, in April, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that was approved by Cabinet to the draft housing strategy. This set out the approach to ensure all stock is safe and in good repair, and we achieve maximum decency. Stock condition and data let capital program, as well as manage responsive repairs. So, yes, our housing management, that's what governs our direction of travel and manages how we manage our budgets, and the expenditure going forward is through the asset management strategy.
Can I just put a point in voids? Do we have updates on voids?
Is that one?
Yeah.
Right, the end-to-end void project has been ongoing to redesign the process for voids to be more efficient and effective. The aim is to reduce the overall turnaround time to relet properties. As the process pilot proceeds, there is a risk of a dip in service performance as our teams familiarise themselves with new ways of working, and the transition of responsibilities as well as learning is undertaken. This is being monitored closely by the end-to-end voids and repairs project board, and any intervention required will be actioned. So we set up that board in order to, because we knew we had an issue. We you know, that's no secret. We had an issue and we addressed it, and that's how we done it. So, and we're working through it hopefully we will eventually come out the other end, but that's where we are at this moment.
Good, thank you for the update. Can I have Councillor Gould, please? The question. Councillor Mir?
Yeah, my question around the rough sleeping. Handle recorded about 41 people sleeping rough in a single night, which is up from 14 from the previous year. That is a significant rise, but we are still better off from many other boroughs like Westminster. They have noted 388 in a one single night. My question would be, what sort of help council are receiving from local charities and the communities to tackle those issues?
Right, okay. This is an up-to-date report as of today. We are currently working with 35 rough sleepers on the streets of Hounslow. Okay, so that's the figure's gone down, which is good news. They are. Hold on. That one there.
Yeah.
Right, okay, yeah. So how we support, there's no second night out. Somewhere safe to stay, temporary accommodation, supported accommodation, private rented sector, clearinghouse. We have no dedicated rough sleeper accommodation provision in Hounslow. However, we are hoping to pilot housing first, as there is scope within the recommissioning of the supported housing pathway for there to be some dedicated accommodation for rough sleepers. We will be in a better position to fund any gaps in service provision next financial year when the government spending review is complete. And we know that our allocation is via the rough sleeping prevention and recovery grant.
Thank you.
Councillor Tuck, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions or maybe some ad hoc as well. How does this housing strategy align with the current review of our HMOs?
Where is it? All right. The revised HMO licensing proposals are out for public consultation and are coming back to Cabinet in August for final approval. Yeah, it's coming back in August.
And how does our relationship with other local authorities play out in housing, like moving residents from one borough or to other, or from other boroughs to London Borough of Hounslow? How significant an issue is this in our borough?
Okay, there were 1,410 placements by other authorities into Hounslow during 23 to 24. As it is relatively affordable. Hounslow made 782 placements in other boroughs, and 24-25 data is not yet available.
So in those terms, we have about 700 net migration coming into Hounslow. So even if we are building affordable houses, they're not going to our residents.
No, because they will go to our residents because the placement that other boroughs are making is under the homelessness legislation. It's temporary accommodation placements, and they move the people back. They still owe them their housing duty. Equally, the people who move to other boroughs will still need to house them permanently. So it doesn't mean that when they move them into our borough, we have to house them. No.
And once a council house is allocated to a family or a person, how often do we review the circumstances, whether they still qualify for the council house? Because the cases are somebody gets a council house, they don't leave it for their entire life. And even their kids try to claim that we still want to live in the house. Do we have a mechanism to?
Yes, we do. We carry out tenancy audits every unannounced every year. Yeah, it is every year. But where we do come across families that are where the children have left and they're on their own, we do encourage them to downsize, and we help them through that process. And that's whether they're eligible for if they're giving up a 3-bedroom property, they can receive £1,000 per bedroom they're giving up as an incentive to do that, along with removal costs and so on. But yes, all of that is looked at on a regular basis, annually at least.
Yes, Councillor Turk.
Is it just an incentive basis, or they are supposed to leave the property if they don't qualify anymore?
Sorry, we're having a debate. They would have only got the property. They would have only to get the property. They would have had to have qualified. If the children then move out, and they're still living in that property, there's nothing to make them move on. Right? There's nothing within the tenancy to make them move on, and we can't evict them. We just can't. So that's why we work with the housing officers, work with them in order to encourage them to give up family-sized accommodation, to downsize, to free up those houses in order for families that are in more need to take them up. So, and we are quite successful in that, because there's good incentives. It's not only the money. In those incentives, people can sort of normally choose where they want to live to a degree. Like if they want to live on a new estate in Brentford or something, they become priority one. And we try and enable that as much as we possibly can to free up those family-sized accommodations.
So at the moment, it's still up to the tenant whether they want to move or not.
Yes.
Even though they do not qualify in their current circumstances.
Yep.
For the house. So are we doing something in the current housing strategy to address this?
We can't, because we're governed by legislation.
So is that illegality?
There's illegality, yeah. We're covered by the Housing Act and the legislation. So our hands are tied.
So maybe, Councillor, maybe if I can understand the question better. So if somebody, to get a council property, you need to be eligible in the first instance. And then if your circumstances change, and for example, somebody has died and the children are not entitled to succeed, because we need to go by the 1985 Housing Act that sets out the rules for succession. If they're entitled to succeed, then they'll be eligible to continue to either remain in the same property or to be moved to a smaller property. If they are not entitled to succeed and we have the right to evict them, we go through the legal process and we evict them. So that's the process. We have to just go in line with the Housing Act. Thank you.
But I spoke more along the lines of, if the children had just grown up and moved on, whereas Modesta spoke about succession.
Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Give me a chance a second time. So I have just questions. Do we have any exact number? How many properties are vacant in this borough?
Yes, 287.
And do you have any charge sheet or any number, how many property you can bring next year or the next year, because the housing is a crisis. So do you have any charge sheet where we thinking the people will be available for the residential?
Yeah, we currently carry out 600 lets, on average 600 lets per year. But there's always that small turn. We're always going to have voids. So at any point, we can't say we've got no voids, because we physically can't, because we're getting voids are coming through on average 12 a week. So we've always got voids, but we're working through to get rid of the voids as quickly as possible, because we know there's people in need, and we're losing revenue, and we don't want that either. So we're working as fast as we possibly can to get that get them turned around and back re-let.
Can I just pull on that point? So would you say, as part of the strategy 2520 to 2030, is that we'll be looking at voids coming down over the strategy? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of questions from me. With the strategy, so just bearing in mind the 2530 strategy, what is, and I do know you kind of highlighted on your pack, but what is the actual priority in 25 to 30?
We have 5 priorities, but we can't say that any of them is of a less priority than the other. They're all equal. Which are, sorry, hold on. Right, it's to tackle homelessness and rough sleeping, safe and decent council housing, raise standards in the private rented sector, residents live healthy, independent and sustainable lives, more genuinely affordable homes. So that's our top priorities, and those are the ones that are out for public consultation, for the strategy for the residents to have their input. So, but that's, and that's what we want to hear from. That's what we want to hear their views on those headings.
Thank you. That's great. So this could be kind of fluid throughout the actual strategy itself. Okay. Of course, we've spoken about the private sector as well and the standards there. Are we looking at, or could we be looking at, amending HMO licensing conditions to make sure that people do have decent homes or a decent place to live?
Yeah, the consultation is out at the moment under the Renters' Rights Bill. So when's that coming back?
We're expecting, so it'll introduce a regulator of private sector housing. Sorry, Councillor. So the Renters' Rights Bill is at committee stage in the House of Lords. It's expected to introduce a regulator for private rented sector housing that will then set out what the standards are for us as a local authority to enforce. We're informed by our colleagues in the private sector enforcement team that there is sufficient powers set out in our current HMO licensing scheme and in the proposals out for consultation at the moment that we'll be able to expand and adapt those to implement the new Renters' Rights Bill standard. So nobody fully knows what the new Renters' Rights Bill standard will be. It will be things like having to carry out repairs in timescales, a decent home standard, which will mean that you have to have a somewhat modern kitchen and bathroom, heating systems that work, and we are equipped to deal with that, Council. We've been insured by our colleagues in private sector housing, Pat Gilmore and a team.
Thank you for that. So, but that's not legal requirement, not at the moment.
Not at the moment.
Not yet, but watch this space, Councillor. So nobody's committing to a date, and it's because of the mechanism. Like the Regulator of Social Housing Bill, the Renters' Right Bill doesn't actually cover any specific requirements in the legislation. It will introduce a regulator, and then that regulator will introduce the requirements as secondary legislation. So there's very little information on what the actual standards will be. It's going to create something that will then create the guidance, and that's when we'll know what we're dealing with. But we expect later in this year, the autumn, Councillor, we'll see exactly what the standards are, more information in the form of a public consultation, and then we will, as an authority, be drafting plans as to what our response to that will be.
Can I just add that even though we're not just waiting for that, we have our own private sector enforcement team, and they're exceptional. And I do referrals all the time, and like probably most of us in the room, we do, and that they're actioned pretty quick, and the landlords are held to account. And if they're not, then they're served with a section notice and so on. There's a whole legal process that's followed. So we're not waiting for that bill, but that bill will certainly give us more powers to be able to enforce.
That is great. Thank you very much for the work there. Do you want to come in? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. So there was some discussion earlier in relation to the rights of those people residing in council housing. So I do agree with the points made by Ms. Anucha and Councillor Sampson, but I just wanted to supplement those points. So as you know, if a person is on the housing register and eligible for council housing, they may, I mean, there's not much council housing available, but they may secure a property. Once they have done so, they reside there under a secure tenancy under the Housing Act 1985. So no matter if their financial circumstances change, they might earn a lot more money in future years. That would not remove their eligibility. So they remain entitled to reside in that property for life, unless they do something which would enable the council to evict them, for example, not paying their rent or some other kind of behaviour, which, but the council would obviously have to go through the legal process in order to secure an eviction. Okay, so just wanted to clarify that point. And just in relation to the Renters' Right Bill, as Mr. Tomlinson has said, that's currently in the House of the Parliament. And once it's enacted and becomes an act, then it will be enforced, and it may have some impact not only upon private sector housing but also social landlords. For example, the proposal to abolish the short-hold tenancies.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so just a couple of more questions from me. So, with regarding to prioritising affordable housing in developments, how confident are we that sufficient affordable housing can be in place in the next 5 years?
Sorry, Chair, I was just thinking about what Benita said. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
So, just prioritising affordable housing, how confident are we that we be able to get this all sorted in the next 5 years?
There'll never be enough. There'll never be enough. Like I said earlier, we can't build fast enough. Financial constraints. We are, like every other local authority, are financially with the HRA up against it.
So just to confirm, we're still going to build throughout the strategy, but it's not going to be enough. Yeah, okay. So over the 5 years, we're going to still build, but it's just not going to be enough for demand. Yeah, okay, thank you. Is there any other questions, concerns? Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Chair. Just got 3 specific questions. First of all, right to buy, are residents still eligible for that in our borough? And if so, how many houses are sold off each year?
Yes, the right to buy is still active, but it changed, the rules to that changed on the 21st of November last year, where the discount was reduced by 120,000. So it's not so lucrative anymore to apply. It's not a good deal anymore. So we are currently working through, I think, 700 and odd applications, which is pretty much the best part of 3 years worth of right to buy applications. If we were working in a normal, that's how long it's going to take us to actually process all of that. But a lot of people are not going to be eligible, and for one reason or another, but we don't anticipate to sell many properties because of you need now a larger deposit than what people could potentially they're going to be losing through that right to buy. That makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. So these next 2 questions sort of tie in together. So first, is there a clear eligibility criteria to apply for council housing? Because I often get residents contacting us sort of thinking that they're eligible and then they're told they're not, but there's not really a criteria as such. And then that leads on to the problem that we have if they're not eligible for social housing. They don't have deposits or an income to be able to rent in the private sector. What help are we offering our residents that are in that situation that aren't eligible for social housing but also can't afford private rental? Are we working with the private rental sector to get them into these properties? What's happening?
It's on the website. It's very clear. It's laid out very clear. But yes, we do have. Sorry. Yes, we do have. Sorry, do you know? It's my mind's gone blank. Sorry, Emma. It's what you my brain's gone blank.
So I'll just explaining that how to apply and who is eligible is on the website, on the allocation policy. It's a public document on the website, and on our housing advice page as well on the website, we do sort of set out basic advice to people on how to assess accommodation. And ultimately depends on if you're working, you could, apply for benefit if your income is low. And we do give advice and assistance to people who are eligible as set out by law. But obviously we can't house everyone because there isn't enough housing and there isn't enough money out there to help everyone.
Sorry, I'll remember. The criteria is very clear. But what we find is that when people make an application for housing, they automatically want a council house. That's not always the case. It depends on what is available at the time, whether they are actually discharged into the private sector. There's a whole host of, it's all in our policy, how that each case is treated. It's all fair. It's very clear and it's all on the website. But I think that's where I certainly, with my casework, it's probably the same as yours. People are like, why can't I get a council house? But with the private sector, if they are discharged into private sector, we then, if they're eligible for housing and they are discharged, then obviously the council sort that out. But if it is that they're not eligible for housing, then they wouldn't necessarily qualify for the deposit. But if they are a family and they wanted to seek that route, then we would assist them with the rental deposit, so long as they found the property that they wanted to rent.
Even if they're not eligible for the deposit, are we helping families find accommodation? Or if they're not eligible, it's down to them to find a guarantor or the deposit or affordable housing? Is there any help that we offer the people that are in that position, the residents?
They can come for housing advice. Anybody can come for housing advice. But if they're not eligible, then no, we will not be helping them. They have to make their own arrangements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. So last question, I promise. So this is, of course, we do have a lot of stock in housing. We have 13,000 housing stock in here. Could one of the strategies be that we can sell some of the property and use the revenues generated in that to invest in new developments?
No, because if you're selling a council property, okay.
So this won't be to residents. This will be to other businesses, other developers.
This is a question for Tom. I can't answer that. That is a question for Tom, because that whole lots of things come into play, like estate regeneration. It could, but for housing, no, we would not be selling accommodation in order to build new accommodation for the capital, or even with using the capital receipts. We won't be doing that, because the build is actually more expensive than what we would be selling the property for, especially if the person does qualify for the right to buy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point in relation to the potential for selling council housing. Council housing is held in what is called the housing revenue account. The council may not sell council housing to developers unless they have consent from the Secretary of State for those disposals. There are some general consents and there are limits there, thresholds, but the default position is that you would require consent.
Thank you for that. Okay, so thank you all very much for that. So I'm just coming back to committee now. Is there, after sort of listening to everything, all the sort of questions and answers, moving forward with the actual strategy, what would you like OS to recommend? So please, this is for everyone. Councillor Elmslie.
Yes, go on, Chair, I'll bite. I understand the pessimism around the building and the meeting the demand with supply for the housing in the borough. I also think, though, that we need to at least have some sort of plan or strategy or target in mind. I do think that it's positive that one of the criteria for success in the housing strategy is that we have more affordable homes secured by the end of those 5 years. I'd like to see a plan for how we do that. I take Councillor Sampson's point, it will never be enough. But maybe the recommendation is that we work closely with Councillor Bruce and his department to ensure that we are boosting that supply in the borough as much as we possibly can. Maybe that means lobbying government to change planning laws. It could be any number of things, but I think we need a proper strategy, line by line. Here's what we're going to do to try and increase the supply by as much as possible in this borough, whether it's private or public. I think that would go a long way to reassuring people that we are taking this housing crisis very, very seriously.
So would it be fair to say that we add targets in the next 5 years?
Yeah, targets or a plan to work with Councillor Bruce and his department to increase that supply.
Any other recommendations from committee members? Councillor
Thank you, Chair. In my point of view, if you're talking about the vacant property, the empty property, if they prioritize, if they need small amount of investment, make it usable, get the revenue, and I think the empty property can be on 4 or 5 phases. Invest the money, generate the funds, and work on other. Is keep the empty property is not worth it for the council, so we can start on that phase. I think that's my recommendation.
So just clarify the recommendation. So we'll be seeing in the strategy that the voids go down. So of course you're going to be coming back to us, I'm sure, in future OSC meetings. So for this, or part of the strategies that we are looking at voids, would you say voids coming down over that strategy? Yeah. Okay. Any other recommendations from committee members?
Can I make a few comments?
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Mia, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This housing strategy should ensure that new development deliver for affordable homes for local people, especially families, key workers, and young adults trying to remain in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you very much there then. Okay, so of course, we are noting the housing strategy here. So you are urged to have your say, of course. Everyone said it unless there's anything else. Work cross-council. So this is working cross-council to boost the housing supply however we can. And if that means you got to work with Tom's team, then maybe there's something in there that we can share. Thank you. Focus on reducing the number of voids and focus on affordable homes as well. So just really sort of pushing affordable homes for the people of Hounslow. And that is it. That is all the recommendations so far. We sort of fall in agreement with those recommendations. Yeah, thank you very much. That's it. If I could just see a seconder for the recommendations, thank you, and just a vote. Of course, with recommendations. Thank you so much. That moves forward. With that, and to that, it comes to an end. Thank you so much. I'm pretty sure that you'll be coming back to OSC and getting an update of how the strategy is going. But wish you well. I think it's very, very, very good. I think you could do really, really well. So well done.
And I look forward to coming back and telling you we have no voids.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Okay, so agenda item number 5. This is the Scrutiny Panel Reports 24-25 deep dive recommendations. We now have an opportunity to review the recommendations emerging from the work of the scrutiny panels. We receive regular updates from the panel chairs, Councillor Sidhu, on the work of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel and their agenda packs, Councillor Gull on the work of the Health and Adult Care Panel, and Councillor Nagra on the work of the Housing and Environment Scrutiny Panel. Today, though, we have we are asked to review the work of the scrutiny panels and agree all of their recommendations. Unfortunately, Councillor Sidhu is unavailable to be with us this evening. However, I do have Councillor Yates, the panel vice chair, will provide an overview of Councillor Sidhu's behalf. Yep. Councillor Yates, Councillor Gore, Councillor Nagra, we await for your report. Can I ask for Councillor Gould first? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, to give me opportunity to give the update and make a report. I'm a Councillor Riaz Gul and the Chair of Health and Adult Care Scrutiny Panel for this year. The Health and Adult Care Scrutiny Panel have now concluded our deep dive into commissioning and contract managing for adult social care that take place in Hounslow. These recommendations have been shared with Executive Directors Stephen Forbes, Martin Whittington, and to the respected Cabinet Member, Councillor Bath, in late April this year. These have been considered and appear to have been well received by the directors, Cabinet members. This year, the Health and Adult Care Panel's deep dive focus on exploring how London Borough of Hounslow carried out its commissioning and contract management in adult social care. This year, the scope of the work meant that the panel engaged with a variety of internal teams that are involved in a relevant process. The panel considered how team in the council utilized a variety of different providers to be able to meet its adult social care needs. The panel selected two topics after thorough discussions at the first panel meeting of the year. While Hounslow appeared to have been effective at managing providers, the continued financial pressure in adult social care made this deep dive timely. As a panel, over the course of the year, number of heard about the overcharging approach of commissioning and contract management. This was supplemented by detailed presentations by internal teams on how data was used, trend and identified, and how cost was controlled. The panel also went out and visited Bristol Court, assisted by living facilities, and heard from members of the staff about how residents live and how the facilities help the council provide high quality care at affordable rates. Overall, the panel members were provided a lot of important information on relevant process that enable member to develop recommendation. The panel identified several key aspects of the process as being key to develop recommendations. Member found that the process in place for commissioning and contract management are robust and that council built facilities are key to maintaining good quality of care. The panel did note that the financial pressure which currently are impacting the system do not appear to be easier, and that recognizing this and focusing on this is key to ensuring that residents can access the care that they need when they need it. By addressing challenging proactively, the council can position itself to meet the evolving need of residents while maintaining financial sustainability. The panel's four final recommendations presented to the executive directors and the leader member as well as follows. Number one, the panel is agreed. The panel calls for stronger reporting mechanism to allow easier identifications and resolutions of contract-related issues. The panel is keen to ensure greater transparency in the contracting process To achieve this, the Council will continue to be compliant with contract decision and to continue applications performance review that should be made public wherever feasible. The second recommendation is agreed. The panel recommend continue investment in care facilities to address the growing demand for support services. It is essential that residents continue to have access to high quality care in facilities that remain financially viable, both for individuals and the council. This investment should focus on long term sustainability and affordability. Recommendation 3, the panel suggests that the council aims to continue to minimize its investment in early investor and prevention care to reduce long-term pressure on adult social care, expanding community-based support and promoting independent living could improve outcome while alleviating demand on more intensive services. Through these recommendations, the panel hopes to continue BC the council carry out effective monitoring of the contracting and commissioning process regarding adult social care. The year 2024 and 25 scrutiny year has been productive and insightful one of the health social care panel. Through the focused deep dive into the commissioning and the contract management in adult social care, we have developed such a deeper understanding of how care is planned, purchased, and monitored in Hanslow. The year work was important to the panel because it is revealed not only the strength of our current commissioning approach, such as contract monitoring and values for the money, but also the pressure and the risk that must be managed as demand for the services continue to grow. We learned how vital it is to ensure the contract decisions are transparent and accountable, and how ongoing engagement with providers and volunteers organization can improve services for more of our most vulnerable residents. We were particularly struck by the council's efforts to invest in its own care facilities like Bristol Court and to protect prevention services such as floating support. These approach help deliver both better outcome and long-term sustainability. However, we are mindful that the financial pressure, workforce challenge, and raising demand, especially among older adults and the people with the learning disabilities, required continued attention and adoptions. Our recommendation focus on strengthening performance reporting, ensuring transparency in contract decisions, investing in care infrastructure, and depending engagement with the volunteer sectors. We also believe firmly in the need for the greater emphasis on prevention care and early interventions to reduce longer-term pressure on the care system. I would like to thank all our members, officers, cooperatives, and providers who contributed their time and insight to this process. The panel's work was greatly supported by the council officers in the commissionings and adult social care teams, whose openingness and collaborations made this review possible. A special thanks to Dr. Witt for assisting me and supporting me for this year. As we look ahead to the 2025-26 scrutiny year, I look forward to continue our work with focus on how Hanslow can further strengthen support for residents who need care and those who provide it, especially as we seek to build a fair, sustainable, and person-catered care system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gull. Councillor Yates, please.
Thank you. I will be presenting the work we have done for the Children and Young People's Panel deep dive and updating you on how the meeting with the lead member, Councillor Samir Chowdhury, went last week. Please note the recommendations 1 and 2 in the slide deck attached to the agenda of the meeting were presented as one recommendation to the lead member. This is Appendix 1 on the report. Of the 5 recommendations that were presented to the lead member, 2 were accepted and 2 were partially accepted. This year, the panel was made up of 8 councillors and 3 co-opted members, 1 parent governor, 1 youth worker and 1 community lead. Overall, we had a good member engagement and everyone attended at least 2 meetings. As shown on slide 6, we met 4 times during the year. We considered potential topics before deciding that we would focus on school engagement and disadvantage at the primary school level. This felt like a natural progression from last year's topic, which was school readiness. We then spent time researching trends in school attendance and going out to local schools to understand their experiences around poor attendance. Primary school children who are eligible for free school meals have lower attainment and lower levels of attendance. Attendance affects attainment. After the COVID-19 pandemic, many Hounslow schools reported increases in persistent and severe absence. In addition, parents' attitudes around school attendance have worsened. The Council School Attendance Support Service uses a support-first approach and has a good reputation across the borough. Not all schools are able to support families that are struggling with attendance and engagement, and factors that affect attendance include physical and mental health, attitudes towards schools, accessibility of schools, and socio-economic background. During the first panel meeting, we looked at evidence around attainment, disadvantage, and attendance in Hounslow. We found that the attainment gap tends to be the largest for those children who receive free school meals, as well as those with SEND. Looking at attainment, we found that Hounslow performs well compared to England. However, the 21% point gap in the share of disadvantaged pupils reaching the expected standard at the end of year 6 indicates systematic inequalities. We considered this data alongside absent levels, showing us that disadvantaged students are also more likely to be severely or persistently absent from school. After the first meeting, we drafted our terms of reference, which included these key lines of inquiry. See slide 9. What factors contribute to poor school attendance and attainment in primary school? What are the impacts on primary school children of poor attendance rates? Do these differ for children facing socioeconomic disadvantage? What is the Council's current strategy to support school attendance and attainment, particularly for children that are disadvantaged? And what support or schemes exist locally, Council and partners, to support good engagement at primary school attendance and attainment? What schemes can provide support to schools and parents where engagement is a challenge? During the second meeting, we received evidence on the Council's work addressing attendance, covering barriers to school attendance experienced by pupils and their families in Hounslow, the Council's principles around supporting good attendance, wider impacts of poor attendance for primary school pupils, legal duties of parents and carers with regard to school attendance, data on attendance among primary school pupils in Hounslow, groups that are at greater risk of poor attendance, and the current school attendance support service offer. Graham Baker, Head of Access to Education, also shared his reflections for 2025 to 26, outlining some of the service's plans. These included continuing to run attendance networks for schools, which aim to focus on preventative approaches going forward. During our third meeting, slides 18 to 20, you can see an outline of our findings from the site visits we did across Hounslow. They're divided into challenges faced by the school, learnings that the school reported, interventions that the school has trialled, and asks and suggestions that each school had for the council. In the third meeting, we also received written evidence on the support available from Place to Be. Finally, we received a stakeholder map, which is slide 22, which outlined the services available to support attendance across Hounslow. This helped us to identify gaps to feed into the recommendations. In addition, we received further evidence, which you can see on slide 23. Finally, we developed recommendations which have now been presented to the lead member, Councillor Samir Chowdhury, and Senior Officer Stephen Forbes. Our recommendations are as follows. The panel recommends that the School Attendance Support Service collaborate with Hounslow's family hubs to run targeted support sessions, promoting the benefits of attending school for pre-primary and early primary school-aged children. Sessions should occur termly, providing educational materials for parents around the possible long-term impacts of absence on children aged 4 to 11. This was accepted. Recommendation 2. The panel recommends that the communications team and family information service expand current campaign around school attendance using social media, among other channels, to promote school clubs engagements as a key part of school life, as well as good attendance at school. This was also accepted. Recommendation number 3. The panel recommends that Hounslow schools are provided with a standardised bank of materials for running attendance-related workshops for new parents and carers. This should include case studies of successful approaches, for example, incentive schemes, and be promoted at least once per term in order to reach parents and carers who may be new to the school mid-year. This has been partially accepted and is under the agreement that Hounslow Education Partnership are asked to take primary responsibility of leading this in collaboration with the local authority. Recommendation number 4. The panel recommends that the council lobbies the Department for Education for funding to make free before and or after school clubs possible for all eligible reception pupils in Hounslow, cementing good engagement and attendance for all children starting primary school. This could be considered for further rollout if it's successful. This has been partially accepted with an amendment to reflect the current government rollout. And our final recommendation is the panel recommends that the council engages in crisis avoidance by developing a survey pro forma that can support schools in forming an evidence base around what enables or prevents children and young people from attending or engaging with school. This has also been partially accepted under the agreement that Hounslow Education Partnership are asked to take primary responsibility of leading this in collaboration with the local authority. We are now working with Philip Walker and Stephen Forbes to collaborate with HEP on the recommendations that the lead member would like their support with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just going to pause there for a moment. Is there anything that the councillors, lead members and officers would like to say at this stage, please?
Sure, thank you, Chair. I'll go first. Actually, I'll introduce myself. Councillor Lily Bath, I'm the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care, Public Health and Health Integration. Firstly, I actually wanted to thank Scrutiny and the Chair for doing the deep dive exercise into adult social care commissioning and contracting. And it's always really helpful for me as Cabinet Member, but I hope you got something out of it as well in terms of understanding what actually goes on with commissioning. I wanted to say I'm pleased that, firstly, I accept the recommendations. I agree with them and happy to accept them. That's not a problem at all. But I'm pleased that some of the things that you highlighted around some of the recommendations around our processes being clear and value for money, I think is really robust, and value for money, I think is really important, because obviously, as your report highlighted, there's huge financial challenges for adult social care, not just for Hounslow, but across nationally. And we know what the picture looks like in the future. I think, you know, you've sort of stressed it a number of times in your report, sort of rising demand, aging population and complex needs. So we are aware of the challenges. And, you know, as a council, we want to work as hard as possible to sort of address some of the future challenges, whether that's through prevention or investing in extra care facilities, or improving the health and well-being of our residents so that they are healthy and don't need that sort of help later on, or they don't reach a crisis situation which costs us a lot more. I'm actually also really pleased that you went to see Bristol Court, because I remember I opened it in 2019 because I had the housing portfolio then, and I thought it was an excellent facility. But that's an example of a facility that helps us to provide a really good service for some really vulnerable residents, but also helps us to reduce the costs in terms of the sense that we, you know, where it's cheaper to provide a facility like that rather than residential care. So yeah, overall, thank you very much. Happy to accept the recommendations, and I know we're aware of the future challenges. It's not going to get easy, but you know, there are initiatives and things that we have in place, whether it's prevention or investing, that hopefully will mitigate some of the costs. But you know, it is difficult times, as we all know, not just for us but nationally. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Samir Chaudhry, Cabinet Member for Children's Education, Employment Skills. Thank you so much, Councillor Yates. I've had a very lengthy meeting with Councillor Ramasadu, I think a few days back, it was last week, on these recommendations. First of all, I think it's really, really important that I would like to thank all of you, the panel members who have gone and visited the schools and have had a conversation with the teachers, how to tackle this attendance issue. And you must have seen, I can see these recommendations. They're really good one, I've already said. But when you see with our work, which we are already doing, we have done the attendance campaign on the social media previously, a couple of months back as well, and we're going to carry on doing work through the comms. And there has been work happening with the family hubs and the children's centres recently as well. But thank you. I personally would like to thank all of you and the panel members on behalf of myself and Stephen's team for all the good work you have done. Happy to accept all the recommendations, some partially, some we've already discussed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Anything from? Oh, yeah, has to do.
I think I would disappoint you, Chair, if I didn't take the opportunity to say something. So I'll live to my expectations. I think just a thank you to the deep dive panel in terms of the adult social care thing. I think adult social care is always a bit of a mystery in terms of what it does, who it services, how it operates. And I think any scrutiny, inquiry, and I think we had some really useful conversations just about what happens in terms of adult social care commissioning. And it is a huge area of pressure for us in terms of just overwhelming demand and the financial pressure. So I think thank you to the panel for the interest. And I think hopefully there was some information flowed that informed panel members. I think in terms of the young people's one, I've spent the afternoon today with Ofsted at our annual engagement meeting. Attendance, as Councillor Chowdhury has pointed out, is a significant issue nationally. Unfortunately, I think persistent attendance is becoming an issue and the norm in our schools, and significant and persistent absence is becoming a real challenge, not only in Hounslow but nationally as well. So I think the focus of the scrutiny panel on what we are doing as a local authority with our schools and parents on dealing with the absence of children in school is an important one, and I look forward to coming back to update on how we've progressed the recommendations, because it's a really vital area that we need to address nationally as well as locally in Hounslow.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. I'll move now to Councillor Nagra to present a report, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Housing and Environment Scrutiny Panel have now concluded the deep dive on flood resilience in Hounslow. These recommendations have been shared with the relevant Executive Director, Jake Barkers, and to the respective Cabinet member, Councillor Rajawat, in late April, and has also been disseminated to other relevant stakeholders. This year, the Housing and Environment Panel's deep dive focused on exploring how London Borough Hounslow, as a lead local flood authority, has sufficient capacity to meet its flood resilience obligations. Specifically, the panel explored the extent to which fluvial and sewer flooding are problems in Hounslow, and the extent to which properties, residents, and businesses in the borough are protected. This involved engaging both with internal and external stakeholders to ensure that members understood the problem and how the council were dealing with it. The panel selected the topic after a thorough discussion at the first panel meeting of the year. While Hounslow appears to have been effective at managing some of the key issues, as this is linked to the corporate ambitions of becoming greener and safer borough, the deep dive was well timed. As a panel over the course of the year, members heard about the overview of the subject from key officers and cabinet members. This was supplemented with detailed presentations by internal teams on some of the key issues, as well as evidence from a variety of the other groups, such as Hounslow Highways, Thames Water, and a variety of voluntary organizations. The panel also went out and carried out a site visit to Brentford to meet with local residents to discuss flood issues while walking along the Grand Union Canal. Overall, the panel members were provided with a lot of detailed information on the various challenges and problems. The panel identified several key aspects of the process as being key to developing recommendations. Members found that the council is delivering in its duties as a lead local flood authority, and that it is looking to improve flood defense assets. There is a strong evidence of the council working with a variety of partners in preparing and dealing with any incidents. There were, however, some suggestions that the council could improve its engagement with local residents on the topic of flood resilience and that there could be more done to encourage greater home adaptations of residents and to prevent as much rainwater from getting into drains. As a result, the panel made the following some recommendations. Number one, the panel recommends that London Borough Hounslow Planning Team give greater considerations to sewer network misconnections and require that new flood walls be built or existing flood walls be increased in height for waterside developments. Number two, the panel recommends that London Borough Hounslow Planning Team encourage the use of permeable surfaces for new developments and ensure greater enforcement of the council's front gardens policy. This should be embedded in the local plan. Number three, the panel recommends that the London Borough Hounslow formalizes its relationships with organizations working on flood alleviation and mitigation to improve collaboration and coordination, particularly in relation to the Thames 2100 plan and the future of the Thames barrier. Number four, the panel recommends that London Borough Council lead on the creation of an officer-led coordination group to support cross-borough collaboration around flood risk policy. Number five, the panel recommends that London Borough Hounslow works with Hounslow Highways to improve maintenance and cleansing of surface drain covers and gullies, both in frequency and coverage, to better address surface water flooding. Number six, the panel recommends that London Borough Hounslow lobby Thames Water to invest in improved infrastructure, including Mogden sewage treatment works, and to extend infrastructure to meet demand from new developments and address sewer and surface water flooding. Number seven, the panel recommends that London Borough Hounslow lobby the Canal and River Trust to address the decline in water quality in Grand Union Canal, particularly the build-up of contaminated sediment and silt. Through these recommendations, the panel hopes to continue to see the council carry out its duty as lead flood local authority and deal with emerging issues. And at the last, I would like to say thank you to Vid and Alfie, who's given me support for the whole year, and it's brilliant work. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. So we now kind of move to the recommendations. I mean, there's a lot there. Of course, it's all in your packs. So firstly, are we sort of agreeing them? I do need a seconder to agree order. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Oh, sorry, forgive me. Yeah, go for it. No, go for it. No, if you have something, no.
I'm going to be the mean opposition member of the scrutiny panel. Sorry. I actually had questions for all three panels. I don't want to hold the meeting up massively, but just on points of clarification, again, coming back to that whole conversation we had in October with the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny about making sure that recommendations are quite targeted. So, Councillor Gull, I had a couple of questions about some of your recommendations. Recommendation 2, in terms of deeper engagement, I just wondered how we measure that. Like, what does deeper engagement actually look like, and what does success look like there? And then on recommendations 3 and 4, it talks about continued investment. Are we asking the council to invest more? Are we asking them to invest differently? What does that actually mean, and what does success look like? What's the actual target for that investment?
Thank you, Constable Steve. First of all, because the panel is going through the details, we do understand the council investing the money, but we are saying if we can more invest the money on the fair way for the commissioning and for the contracting. Because our deep dive question is commissioning and the contracting. We are concerning just on the particular on that part. Our concern is if you invest the money, you need to be just on the fair and need to be clear and the feasible for the public and for all the people. And then you have should be a mechanism to check if you have give any services to the provider, the providers are providing the proper services. That is the first point. The second point is you're talking about the investment. We do understand the council is investing more money there, and we need to make a balance. So that's why we in our recommendation second we say we appreciate for this department and the council, they invest in the money, but as a balance, we need to be considered if you're investing in the right way and the money is justified for the services. That is our second recommendations. If you have any question, I'm more than happy to answer.
Um, just on the investment point, so are we saying that they should continue investing what they currently are?
Yeah.
That's the recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just on a couple of the other panels, just Councillor Yates, I'm going to pick on you next because you were second. Sorry. And can I say I really like the fora suggestion. I think it's a really good one. Recommendation 5. This fora for parents in a similar situation. I guess my question comes around the final recommendation, which was a suggestion for the Department for Education. I have lots of recommendations I would probably make to Bridget Phillipson. What power do we have as a panel or even as a council to affect that change? And if we don't have that power to affect that change, should we be making recommendations to government departments?
Councillor Chowdhury, are you able to answer that question? I'm not really sure what powers that we would have to.
I'll answer. I would say to Councillor Emsley, you have every right to lobby a government department and how it, in essence, progresses with policy and investment. So the recommendation and the conversation we had is, the Mayor of London has invested in terms of free school meals. There is a rollout of after-school clubs that's planned by government, and it will carry on. I think the discussion we had with the panel was there's still space for potentially further, more and different. So I think my role potentially is with Councillor Chowdhury to advise the panel and to consider through Councillor Chowdhury's portfolio lead about what communication can be sent to government department in terms of how to progress with that plan. Government the DFE has a very clear idea how it wants to roll out after schools clubs and investment in breakfast clubs. We might be able to shape that a bit. So I think you as a scrutiny panel and the council as a whole has an ability to put forward some ideas, and more than happy to help the panel and Councillor Chowdhury articulate some of that, because one size does not always fit all need. So there's a local perception here about how we could use some of that money.
It would be unfair of me not to pick on the final scrutiny panel now, Chair. But it's actually quite a similar question, Councillor Nagria, on housing and environment. I think the final two recommendations are about compelling outside bodies to do something. Again, that was a discussion we had with the Centre for Scrutiny and Governance. What power do we actually have to compel these outside bodies to do what we're asking them to do?
Recommendation number 6 and 7.
Exactly, yeah. And in terms of targets, I mean, what does success look like? That they say yes, that they do something? Do we bring them in front of the panel if they don't do it? How do we measure success with those recommendations?
No, it's basically, I just do believe, if just working like with other infection, like mock done sewage treatment works, we just do believe if we will work with the other stakeholder, other organization, it will be more like we can do the better, like make the infrastructure more than be clean, and we can address for the good developments. That's why. And number 7, we're talking about that we have been visited the Canara River Trust. So just because, and when I just been visited in the Brentford area, I just checked myself in the Canal River. It's quite the water quality is not good. So that's where discussion with the, if we just do work with the Grand Union Canal and River Trust, we can be contaminate this one issues. We can be resolved that one. I do believe already Hounslow Council is a main lead local authority. If we work with them trust, we can be get the more good result. That's what I was thinking. That's why the suggestion. If we can recommend the London Borough Hounslow, we can work with them. If you have the more good advice, you can.
We're being a little bit optimistic. I think it's good. I think it's good. Okay. So let's quick. It's there, of course. I think it's a good set of recommendations. Thank you for those questions, Councillor Emsley. Yeah, we move on to the recommendations. Again, it's all there. We've got some clarity around those. Do I have a seconder for all of those recommendations for the committee panels? Yeah. Vote for all of them. Yeah, that's passed through. Thank you so much for that. The other sort of recommendation, of course, thank you for the engagement from cabinet members. Thank you for being here and sort of engaging on that. And of course, I would just like to sort of thank panel for all their hard work this year as well. So thank you all for all your input. So thank you. Okay, so I mean that sort of finishes that part of the meeting. I'm now going to move on to agenda item number 6. Now this is yeah. Sorry, you can stay or go. That's perfectly up to you. Yep. Thank you. So this is Northwest London Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee update. Members of the committee will know Councillor Nagra is the council's representative on the Northwest London Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Unfortunately, she was unable to attend this month's meeting. I do, though, have an update on the discussion from the officers who did attend the committee, and it runs as follows. Members received an extensive update on a public consultation and proposed implementation of a new standardised model of adult community specialist palliative care across Northwest London. 2 delivery options were presented. Option A, preferred by NHS at Northwest London, would implement the new model without reopening the Pembridge palliative care inpatient unit, focusing instead on equitable local provision and financial sustainability. Option B would include reopening Pembridge, but at the cost of delaying implementation and reducing funding to other hospices. The consultation is in its final stages, and it appears that the preferred option will be implemented. The new model aims to provide consistent 7-day-a-week, 12-hour community support team, expanding hospice at-home provision, enhanced bereavement and psychological support, and the creation of 46 new enhanced end-of-life care beds across all boroughs. The committee acknowledged the scale of engagement, 84 sessions and multiple targeted outreach activities, and welcomed the progress made. Members stressed the importance of continued scrutiny over the equity of the access, cultural competence and financial viability. A final decision by the NHS NWL board is expected in summer 2025, with phased implementation anticipated from autumn 2025. The committee also received an update on the proposed relocation of the Mount Vernon Cancer Centre to Watford General Hospital, a long debated issue driven by the need of modernised cancer services and address long-standing safety and infrastructure concerns at the existing site. The public consultation has concluded and a decision-making business case is now being prepared. The aim is to ensure patients receive high-quality, safe and sustainable cancer care closer to acute hospital services. NHS colleagues have asked the committee to write a letter in support of the move, which members agreed to do. In addition, the committee was introduced to the Northwest London Integrated Care System Involvement Strategy, which sets out the refresh approach of how NHS will engage with residents, patients, carers, and communities in shaping health services. The strategy focuses on building trust, improving transparency, and ensuring that all voices, especially from the underrepresented groups, are reflective in the service planning and delivery. The committee welcomed the approach, but urged that delivery must be consistent across the boroughs, with clear mechanisms for feedback and accountability. Councillors requested that future update reports on measurable outcomes from involvement activity and demonstrate how insights have led to tangible improvements in services. Finally, the committee received a verbal update from Rob Hurd, Chief Executive for Northwest London ICB. He acknowledged the challenging times and the uncertainty surrounding certain policy announcements. While there is currently no clear picture of what might happen to the workforce across Northwest London, he noted that it would be not easy period and committed to provide a further update to the next JOSH meeting. If members would like to know more, the minutes will be soon available at London Borough of Brent's website. Okay, so we kind of move on to agenda item number 7. So this is the work programme review. So these are suggestions for 2025-26 and moving forward on the next municipal year's OSC. We now turn to working programme. Working programme is the way in which the committee and its panels scope their ideas, areas of focus for the year. Everyone here today will have been a part of that process last summer. It's an opportunity for members to come together in early days of the committee to discuss what should form the basis of their activities across the municipal year. Of course, these things are never set in stone. It is good practice to keep work programme under review. Indeed, members have before them current work programmes detailing change of committee focus since we first met in June. To scope the draft, we have adapted the work programme as new topics gain importance and as circumstances change. Today's focus on the council's housing strategy is the latest series of adaptations. We will normally consider if there's excuse me. We will normally consider if there's anything we would like to add for our future meetings. However, as we approach the final days of 24-25 municipal year, we have instead an opportunity to assess topics that the next committee might want to consider under their working programme in June. So is there anything that the committee members would like to do next, or suggestions for next year? We did. It was carried. Yep. Yeah, sorry, say anything there?
We just want to say thank you very much for conducting the chair, and thank you for the opportunity as I work with you and as team. Thank you very much.
Councillor Helmsley.
I echo, obviously, what Councillor Gill has just said. In terms of the question, though, I think that the big issue facing the borough, probably over the next year and certainly over the past year, is the Lambton Group. It continues to provide a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions over how it operates, over the financial peril that it is putting the council in. I appreciate that there are a lot of changes currently going through the group. I'm not sure if those changes are moving quick enough. I think that the services that it provides are questionable as well. I think that it would be eminently sensible for this panel to look at how the Lambton Group operates, look at some of the changes that the council has proposed, and look at whether it is still fit for purpose as a model. So I would suggest that that should be a priority for the next committee, whoever it is that is the chair and whoever it is that is on that committee as well.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, we'll put it down. Yeah, absolutely, we will put it down for a suggestion there. Is there any others? No. Okay, so so we're just going to go back to the vote on item number 6 with the recommendations. Apologies for this. So again, the vote, we were just going to vote on the recommendations. Firstly, a seconder for the recommendation. Thank you. And voting now for the recommendations. Yeah, thank you very much. All gone. Thank you. Okay, so we move on to agenda item number 8. Any so this is urgent business. Any urgent business? I don't have any. Is there any? No. Moving on to agenda item number 9. So this is the next date of next meeting, which is 9th of June 2025. With that, the meeting of the Overall Scrutiny Committee draws to a close. Thank you for this meeting, of course, everybody and their contributions. As this is the final meeting of the 24-25 committee, I would also like to thank all my fellow scrutineers for this year, to all the officers that have been here over the years as well, and Paul here and his team supporting OSC as well, and of course our legals and CL team as well. So thank you all for being here. But the next meeting will be on the 9th of June 2025, and to that we end the meeting. Thank you so much.